Everything you said we already knew, more or less.
Well, here's something that you didn't know.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the second episode. I'm not too sure what I'm going to call it, but if you have any suggestions, put them down in the comments, and I will hopefully figure something out by the next show. Anyways, so I'm going to break up this, I'm going to break this up into two segments. The first segment is going to be me sharing a story, and the second one is going to be me explaining the process behind the final result, or the final image. Let's get into the story of the photo. It was taken in Tonquin Valley near Jasper, and we were on a multi-day hike, myself, Isaiah, and Josh, two friends of mine, and we started hiking in during, I think it was in the evening. We only had 8 kilometers till our first hike, or to our first campsite, and then we were going to set up our tent. But by the time we got to our first campsite, it started raining. So the conditions already weren't looking the best. We had prepared for a little bit of rain, but nowhere to the extent that we got. The next morning we woke up and it was still cold and wet and muddy. But we had, I think, like 16 or 18 kilometers to our next checkpoint. So we started early in the morning, and we passed over Macarib Pass, which I think is like one of the highest points of the hike of Tonquin Valley. Maybe not, I'm not too sure. But as soon as we got over that pass, it started snowing, like in big chunks. And we were just like, what the heck? Like, there was no one else on the trail, it was only us. And it was muddy, cold, and snowing. So that was less than optimal conditions for what we had anticipated. We continued on. We were all like freezing. Myself and Josh both had soaked boots because ours weren't completely waterproof. And so our feet were cold and the rest of our bodies were cold, but we were also exhausted from hiking. And so we got to Amethyst Lake, which you can see in the image just a little bit. It's not really the focal point, but it is there. And then we continued on to some cabins that they had set up that people could rent and stay in. But we got there and there was no one there because of the time of year. And we were fortunate enough that they were unlocked, so we sought a little bit of refuge, hoping to warm up. And we did after a few hours. We ate and we warmed up a little bit. But then after that, we had to make the decision whether we were going to continue on about another 3 or so kilometers to our next campsite, or double back a kilometer to the Amethyst Lake campsite. We decided to go back a kilometer, and so our campsite wasn't too far from where this photo was taken. But the next day, we called it a night basically. We set up our tent, we made food on the night that we went, or on the day that we stayed in those cabins, tore them up, and we called it early night because we were all just tired and exhausted. And we made the choice that if it snowed and it was going to be worse conditions the following day, then we would just turn back and not complete the little circuit that we had hoped to finish. And I woke up the next morning and there was snow, like 4 inches or something like this, just blanketing everything, like right over the tent. A funny story, sort of a side note, is I had woke up early, first one awake. I had to go to the bathroom really bad, so I unzipped my sleeping bag, put on a jacket, all this stuff, and I didn't want to put on my boots yet for the day because I assumed they were still wet, and I just had put on nice dry socks. But we had a plastic bag, so I just put my feet in 2 plastic bags and went to step out of the tent. But as I went to step out to go pee, I almost landed right back on top of the tent because I stepped on the snow with plastic bags on my feet and didn't think, oh, I'm gonna slip and wipe out. So that was quite comical way to start the day, and sort of just foreshadowing to what the rest of the day would be like. Yeah, there's a lot more detail I could go into this whole trip, but essentially our water pump broke as we were trying to hike out, so we didn't have any water on the hike out other than a few water tablets that we had, and we filled up from a stream or the lake. And I'm sure it was totally fine because it's nice mountain water, fresh water. But there were probably like 17 times on the hike back that I just wanted to fall over in the snow and the mud and just give up because of how exhausted I was. Because of the rain the day before, our packs were wet, which like almost doubled their weight. And it was just unbelievable how miserable it was. But the positive thing was that it made for an unforgettable trip. And honestly, I think I would want to do the same hike again. Maybe not the same conditions. Right now I'm saying, oh yeah, just give me the same conditions and everything will be okay. But I think I'm lying to myself. Although the photos were phenomenal because of these awful conditions. But yeah, so let's get into the photo. If you have any other questions or want to hear a more in-depth story, check out my blog at masonhunter.com/blog. I think I go into more depth on it in maybe 4 posts covering each day. Yeah. But yeah, the photo. So before and after, I'm going to show you that first. It blows me away every time I do it. So this is where we started. Absolutely awful. I was exhausted most of the trip, and so when you're tired, your thought process isn't always great, especially when it comes to creative things, because it takes a lot of mental processing to be like, okay, this is how I want to compose everything, and that just emphasizes like how good those National Geographic photographers are that are able to get these phenomenal images in these insane conditions. Like their mental strength and their physical strength is phenomenal. I can only aspire to be there one day. But you see the original photo I have, the raw file, and I just wanted to get a balanced exposure without blowing out the whites or the blacks too much. And yeah, so you can see the drastic difference here in before and after. So I'll get into explaining sort of these settings here. Exposure, I just boosted a little bit to raise everything up. But you can see here that I crushed the highlights down, and that really helped to get more detail in the clouds. So you're able to see significant change there. And then I also took the shadows and boosted those way up because I wanted more details in the trees and in the foreground here. And then the contrast, that was again to bring up more detail in the clouds and also sort of make the colors and the contrast pop. This ominous scene really lent itself well to high contrast and strong tones or strong blacks. And you can see here that some of the trees are almost pitch black or completely black with no detail. And I think that's fine, like a lot of it's preference. But then there's also my whites, and there's a little bit of peaking there, but I think I want a little more just to brighten it up. You can see it before and after there. It's not much. I don't even know if you can see it, but it just sort of makes that white point a little bigger. And yeah, I like that. So down to clarity. Clarity really helps bring out more detail again in the clouds and in the trees, and it localizes the amount of detail and sort of grit that the photo has. And throughout this whole trip, I think all the photos I made are pretty gritty and contrasty because that's honestly what the environment gave me. Some people go for a specific style every time, and I would love to develop that, but I'm not too sure if every scene lends itself well to one style. I really like to be able to look at the scene, look at the atmosphere that's there, and emphasize that. So if it's like a nice sunny day, then warm tones and soft contrast might work best. But if it's like a cloudy, foggy day like this and terrible weather, then contrast and grit might look a little more welcoming. And now down to vibrance. I use vibrance instead of saturation because it seems to be a little bit more accurate, and saturation sometimes looks gross. It doesn't necessarily get the tones that I prefer. But I brought the vibrance down to -13 to take a little bit off this orange here and the green. I'll go into this next panel here, and you'll see that I brought the saturation of the oranges and yellows down quite a bit, because with those it just gives a almost too warm of a feeling, and I didn't want that. I sort of wanted that stark gray, not stark gray, but stark feeling and look to accompany the subject. I'm not sure if I went over it in the last video, but I have presets and general. I just use general for these. That applies 55 sharpening, and then also removes chromatic aberration and enables lens correction. And it does a few other things here, like I think it ups my contrast by 10 default, and then my vibrance by 10, stuff like that. But you'll notice also in this panel, the effects panel, this is where like the magic sort of happens for this image, because without the dehaze tool, there would be a whole lot less contrast here. So I'll bring that back down to 0, and yeah, you can see like totally different image. Doesn't even compare. You barely get any detail in the clouds, you barely see the mountain, but that just cuts through all that haze and that smoke or fog, and it really allows you to see the mountain and see the detail that is in front of us. And then the vignette I have at 18, and that just seems like a good spot for it. I don't really say too much vignette. If it looks good, then you put it there. If it's not enough, you just increase it. But obviously a good rule of thumb is to go too far and then back it off. So that's obviously way too much. And I prefer a really subtle vignette. That's all for that, all those effects. Crop, I cropped it pretty heavily because I only had one lens with me at 16 to 35, and yeah, not too much thinking went on when I took the original image, because I just knew that there was something here and I wanted to make an image. And each time I took off my backpack to get the camera, I just carried my camera in my hiking bag. It was exhausting. Like, just having the energy to do that for, I don't know, maybe took only 100 photos on the entire trip, maybe 200. Every time it was quite the endeavor. And yeah, but I wanted to make sure I had this tree here, and then these trees, and then this tree here, and then I wanted the mountain to be on this upper third right here. And a 4x5 crop worked really well, because on each side of the mountain, there wasn't much else going on other than clouds and some extra trees. And then in some versions of this photo, and if I wanted to, this little corner here, there's a tree sticking in, and it's kind of bright and distracting, so I would just clone it out. Not the most effective way of cloning out things. I could bring it into Photoshop. This is sort of just a quick, lazy way to show you. But it does a pretty good job. Like, let's see, just touch it up a little bit more, add those last little changes, but you can barely tell that it was Photoshopped. It just looks like part of the mossy ground still. Yeah, I think that's about it. I got rid of, I painted in some areas. So I darkened these rocks here because they were really bright. And they're kind of distracting, but just painting over them a little bit takes away their focus and puts it on over here a little bit more. And then over here, I originally just painted the ground, or painted that tree darker rather than cloning it out. I'm not too sure what my reasoning was behind that, because again, these photos are from a little while ago. And I hope to do more recent photos. I'm just wanting to go back through my portfolio and maybe explain some of my older favorite shots, and get into the flow of this a little bit. The more practice I do, the better I'm sure it will get. And yeah, I really hope you guys are enjoying this. Lastly, I did a gradient filter on here. I boosted the shadows on the foreground by 49, and that was to try and bring out some more detail in the trees. You can see the difference here. There's a little bit, not a whole lot. But then also I crushed the... Oh, maybe did... Let's see. What did I do here? Oh, I applied 2 filters to bring out the shadows on the foreground. I'm not too sure why I did that. There's probably some sort of reasoning. But yeah, that's I think that summarizes the edit aspect of this. If you have any other questions about this photo or the story or comments or maybe even other photos you'd like to see that are in my portfolio, let me know. There's also different genres that I do, and if you'd rather me do some travel portraits or maybe food or product shots, I can do those. I'm not necessarily amazing at them. I definitely think my strong suit is landscape and nature photography, but I'm open to your suggestions. I just love being able to share this with you in this format, which is new for me, and hopefully I improve at it and get better and just create a good series that I can look back on and think, okay, that was a good process. And so I really do appreciate you all sticking with me. Next show I will have a title and hopefully some other things that will add to this show. Thank you everyone for watching.